Welcome to our podcast, where we explore fascinating stories and ideas from various fields. In this episode, we explore how scientists unveiled 13 mysterious viruses in Antarctic seals. To unravel the mysteries of Antarctica, researchers from Arizona State University have unearthed a major discovery where they found the presence of 13 previously unknown papillomaviruses carried by Antarctic seals. The latest findings were published in the journal Virology. Papillomaviruses, HPVs, are a group of small DNA viruses that infect the epithelial cells in humans and other animals. There are hundreds of human papillomaviruses identified, and they are classified into low-risk and high-risk types based on their association with cancer. Papillomaviruses infect various species including humans, mammals like seals, and reptiles, and have long been a focus of scientific inquiry. However, much of the research has predominantly centered around human infections. Melanie Regni, a PhD student at ASU's Varsani lab and the lead author of the study, expressed her enthusiasm for exploring viruses in overlooked creatures, reportedly stating, "Viruses are everywhere. They're the most abundant entity in the universe. But despite that, they're one of the things we know the least about. We don't even know most of them exist," Regni added. Regni's interest in Antarctica led her team to study tissue samples from leopard seals, Weddell seals, and Antarctic fur seals. Through genomic sequencing, they identified 13 novel papillomaviruses, with 11 of them representing entirely new viral types. By employing evolutionary analysis, they determined that these viruses are closely related to papillomaviruses infecting other carnivores. The findings suggested a species-specific co-evolutionary relationship. Of particular concern is the discovery that 9 of these viruses possess genes potentially associated with cancer. This is akin to human papillomaviruses like HPV 16 and 18. Antarctica as a whole continent is very pristine. It's the only one that still remains the least touched by human presence, so we don't know a lot about it. Studying the evolutionary aspect of Antarctica's virome, there is very important to understand how the ecosystem works there, Regni said. Thanks for tuning in.
Flu vaccinations for young children are now cheaper and easier to access in New South Wales. Pharmacists have been given the government green light to vaccinate children under 5, removing the need for sometimes expensive GP visits and freeing up appointments for others.
Just pretend it's not going to...
A tricky task today made a little easier for parents.
We're heading into what could be a difficult winter period. We know that from North America and Europe.
Children as young as 2 now able to receive influenza vaccinations from pharmacists. Until now, only GPs were authorised to vaccinate children under the age of 5.
Pharmacists are working very closely with the GPs in this space.
Well, it'll free up potentially thousands of GP appointments.
Already this year, there have been more than 63,000 lab-confirmed cases of the flu across the country, following an all-time high for the first quarter of the year. Despite these rising cases, vaccination rates for vulnerable groups are falling.
A few years ago, vaccination coverage for children below the age of 5 sat at around 41%. Last year, that was down to as low as 25%.
Under the National Immunisation Program, children aged between 6 months and 5 years are among the vulnerable groups eligible for free flu jabs. The Australian Medical Association saying today's announcement is a missed opportunity for GPs to address vaccine hesitancy amid what it says is an avalanche of misinformation.
We really need a team, community-based approach to dispel any myths about vaccination.
Hayley Francis, 9 News.
Pakistan's drone and missile attacks during Operation Sindoor, showcasing the country's advanced air defence capabilities. But what exactly is S-400? Well, known as Sudarshan in India's service, S-400 is among the world's most advanced long-range air defense missile systems. Developed by Russia's Almaz Central Design Bureau, the system has a radar of range 600 kilometers with a deployment time of 5 minutes and a target speed of 4 1,800 kilometers per hour. The system is capable of tracking, targeting and destroying a variety of aerial threats, including aircraft, drones, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles at various altitudes and ranges. Now, speaking of its capabilities, the S-400 Sudarshan can detect, track and engage a wide array of aerial threats, including stealth aircraft, fighter jets, drones and cruise or ballistic missiles at ranges of up to 400 kilometers. Integrated with the IAF's command and control network, each S-400 squadron consists of 2 batteries, each equipped with 6 launchers, advanced radar and a control center, supporting up to 128 missiles per battery. Now, India has procured 5 squadrons from Russia, with 3 already operational and 2 more expected by 2026. The successful deployment of the S-400 Sudarshan Chakra has significantly strengthened India's air defense shield, providing a credible deterrent against both conventional and asymmetrical aerial threats. Well, its presence has not only foiled immediate escalation attempts, but also redefined the strategic calculus in the region, making it a true game changer for the Indian Air Force.
Trump's trade war could be de-escalating after a successful meeting between the US President and the UK Prime Minister today.
For more, let's bring in John Keogh, economics editor of the Australian Financial Review in Canberra. Johnny, this is pretty hot off the presses. The opposition in the UK are calling it a Diet Coke deal, not really the best thing. I guess the ramifications for Australia are that no matter what they've agreed to or going to agree to, the 10% tariff hasn't come off.
Yeah, that's right, Carl. Look, it looks as if that 10% baseline tariff at this stage between the US and UK will stay, but there has been some details agreed. So Trump's agreed to cut much higher tariffs on UK cars and steel, and in exchange, the UK has agreed to make it easier for American farmers to sell beef and ethanol into the UK market. And the UK is also going to buy more Boeing aeroplanes as well from America too. So it's better than it was for the UK, but it's not an absolute free trade thing where all the tariffs are being eliminated.
Well, the President is a man who loves deals, so what can we hope for, if anything?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure we're going to get a lot more than the 10% baseline tariff, nor do I think that Anthony Albanese should necessarily try and make concessions to eliminate it, because you know, Trump wants things, or the Americans want things like the pharmaceutical benefit scheme being wound back, other things like making it easier for America to sell beef here with just biosecurity restrictions because of historic mad cow disease in America. So I actually think Australia's in a reasonably good position compared to most countries, and maybe we should just accept this without giving up too much to the Americans.
All right, let's see what we've got to bring.
Newly elected Pope Leo XIV is in a new job that will have many crossovers into politics. It's a realm not entirely unknown to the Chicago-born priest. Before becoming Pope, his social media history included sharing criticism of Trump administration policies and of comments by Vice President J.D. Vance. The majority of then-Cardinal Prevost's posts on the X platform are related to or in support of Catholic news and church initiatives. But he recently took a jab at Vance by sharing an article critical of him on the platform X. In early February, he shared an article from a Catholic publication with the headline, quote, "J.D. Vance is wrong. Jesus doesn't ask us to rank our love for others." And his last X post before becoming Pope was critical of the Trump administration. Many of Prevost's posts involve immigration policy. Prior to his first February post, he had been dormant on X since July of 2023.
The EU intends to propose tariffs on Boeing jets. That's according to Britain's Financial Times on Wednesday. The report said the European Commission plans to include civilian aircraft on a list of roughly $100 billion in annual US imports to be targeted. The measures would need to be approved by a weighted majority of member states. And it would only come into effect if the EU doesn't make sufficient progress in its talks with Washington to reduce US tariffs on European goods, according to the report. Boeing and the European Commission did not immediately respond to Reuters' requests for comment. The EU faces US import tariffs of 25% on its steel, aluminum and cars. It also has to deal with so-called reciprocal tariffs of 10% for almost all other goods, including aircraft. That could rise to 20% after President Donald Trump's 90-day pause expires on July 8th. European carriers have hundreds of jets on order with Boeing, but potential levies could potentially raise prices of those aircraft. Both European and US aerospace companies have called for all tariffs to be lifted.
And breaking news just coming in, India has opened 3 gates of the Salal Dam in Jammu and Kashmir's Riyasi amid heightened tensions with Pakistan following a cross-border terror strike. Now, Salal Dam in Riyasi is built on Chenab River. The decision to open gates coincides with India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty and a military operation targeting terrorist camps in Pakistan and POK. The government cited both rising water levels due to rainfall and strategic necessity. Well, the decision follows the Pahalgam terror attack that killed 26 innocent people. And for more on this, the latest that we are getting is that India has opened 3 gates of the Salal Dam in Jammu and Kashmir's Riyasi district. This is amid heightened tensions with Pakistan following a cross-border terror strike. Now, Salal Dam in Riyasi is built on the Chenab River. The decision to open the gates coincides with India's suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty and a military operation which is targeting terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And for more on this, we're being joined by our Assistant Editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal. Siddhant, what can you tell us?
Well, the situation remains precarious. We know that when it comes to the attack mounted by Pakistan yesterday night, this was something unprecedented. We're waiting for more details. The Indian authorities have confirmed the attack, and this was largely confined to the bordering states, Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab, Rajasthan, and clearly India has neutralized many of the projectiles that have come from Pakistan. Now, focus remains from the Indian side is to make sure that there is no repetition, but it looks like, as the Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan said, that Pakistan has chosen to escalate the matter.
Right. Thanks, Siddhant. We'll be closely monitoring the situation, but for now, thanks for getting us that ground report.
A proposed undersea electricity interconnection between Egypt and Greece is now set to become a reality. The two countries, through their top leadership, renewed their pledge during talks in Athens following the signing of cooperation agreement across multiple sectors. We want to give the opportunity to Egyptians, especially young Egyptians, to come legally to our country to work here. And this is also the best response to those who claim that the policy of Greece and of Europe is limited solely to restricting illegal immigration. It should not be the traffickers, Mr. President, who decided who enters the European Union. It must be an organized decision taken sovereignly by the states of Europe in close cooperation and coordination with friendly countries such as Egypt. Among the other deal included 3,000 megawatt underwater cable which will stretch nearly 1,000 kilometers across Mediterranean, linking Egypt and Europe. I also stress the extreme importance that we attach to the electricity interconnection project between Egypt and Greece. It is not just a bilateral project, but also a strategic step with regional and international dimensions, given that it is considered the first direct link for clean energy coming from Egypt to Europe through Greece, and we look forward to the continued support of the European Union for this ambitious project and to speed up the steps to implement it. The project is estimated to cost around $4.5 billion and is expected to become operational within 5 years under an ambitious timeline set by both governments.
Muslim scholars have issued a fatwa calling for jihad against Israel for its war on Gaza. The religious decree, issued on the 4th of April by the International Union of Muslim Scholars, IUMS, is grounded in Islamic jurisprudence. that permits jihad in defense of oppressed Muslims and in response to Israeli atrocities in Gaza that have killed more than 50,000 Palestinians. Ali al-Qaradaqi, the Secretary General of the IUMS, emphasized the obligation of Muslim countries to intervene immediately, militarily, economically, and politically to stop this genocide and comprehensive destruction in accordance with their mandate. So what exactly did the decree entail, and how supportive is the rest of the Islamic world? A fatwa is a non-binding Islamic legal ruling from a respected religious scholar, usually based on the Quran or the Sunnah, the sayings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad. The fatwa against Israel was issued by the IUMS, an organization previously led by Yusuf al-Qaradawi. It's an independent guild of thousands of senior international Muslim scholars established in 2004. Ali al-Qaradaqi is one of the region's most respected religious authorities and is based in Qatar. He stated that the failure of the Arab and Islamic governments to support Gaza while it is being destroyed is considered by Islamic law to be a major crime against our oppressed brothers in Gaza. The scholar laid out the decree comprising some 15 points on X. They included armed and financial jihad against Israel for every able Muslim in the Islamic world, military intervention by Muslim countries, an Islamic military alliance, and prohibiting normalization with Israel, including an oil, gas, and weapons boycott, and undoing peace treaties made by some Arab countries. It also called on Muslim communities in the United States of America to pressure Trump and his government to fulfill his election promises to stop the aggression and establish peace. The UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco established diplomatic relations through the Abraham Accords Declaration in 2020, brokered by President Donald Trump in his first term. Sudan officially signed in 2021. Egypt and Jordan normalized relations with Israel in 1979 and 1994, respectively. Saudi Arabia was moving towards normalizing ties with Israel, but insisted on progress towards a Palestinian state. Talks stalled after 7th of October and Israel's subsequent devastating war on Gaza. In January 2024, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman reportedly told former US Secretary of State Antony Blinken during his visit to the kingdom that while he personally doesn't care about the Palestinian issue, the young Saudi population did. The IUMS decree has received mixed reactions from Islamic scholars globally and Muslims both in the Arab world and diaspora. It's been backed by 14 other prominent Muslim scholars. Days after it was issued, Mufti Muhammad Taqi Usmani, one of Pakistan's most prominent Islamic scholars, declared military jihad against Israel as an obligatory duty for all Muslim governments. Usmani lambasted Muslim countries for failing to support those fighting to protect Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and urged Muslims to use Umrah, voluntary pilgrimage to Mecca funds, to support the Palestinian resistance instead. Pakistan, which was established in 1947, a year before the founding of Israel, has opposed the creation of the Israeli state and has never recognized its sovereignty. Similarly, in March 2024, the Grand Mufti of Libya, Sadiq al-Ghariani, issued a fatwa stating that donating money to the people of Gaza is far more rewarding than performing Umrah. The scholar said it was forbidden for police in Egypt and Jordan to stop people from breaking into borders with Gaza. But in Egypt, pro-government religious scholars have spoken out against the fatwa. Egypt's Grand Mufti Nadir Ayyad, the highest authority for issuing religious opinions in Egypt, criticized it as irresponsible, saying no individual group has the authority to issue rulings on such sensitive matters. Ayyad, who was appointed by Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as Al-Azhar's Grand Sheikh, said that only legitimate authorities can declare jihad in Islam and warned that it would risk destabilizing Muslim societies and violating core Sharia principles. A leading Egyptian pro-government Salafi cleric, Yasser Burhami, also rejected the IUMS fatwa, saying it was unrealistic and contrary to Egypt's 1979 peace treaty with Israel. Burhami is among the main supporters of President Sisi and backed his 2013 coup against his democratically elected predecessor, Mohammed Morsi. This isn't the first time Muslim scholars have issued fatwas against Israel. In 2020, following the normalization of relations between the UAE and Israel, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and Palestine, Mohammed Ahmed Hussein issued a fatwa forbidding Emiratis from visiting Al-Aqsa Mosque via Israeli routes. In November 2023, Indonesia's top Islamic clerical body, the MUI, issued a fatwa urging Muslims to boycott goods and services from companies supporting Israel. The fatwa stated that supporting Israel or its affiliates contradicts Islamic law and called for solidarity with Palestinians against Israeli aggression.
As Victory Day celebrations begin worldwide, we take a look at final rehearsals happening in the streets of Moscow. Take a look.
A milestone event marking the 80th anniversary of the World War II victory. Military columns rumble through Moscow as Russia conducts its final rehearsals for the parade. Self-propelled artillery systems and missile carriers line the streets near the Kremlin. On display was a range of modern military hardware, from air defense systems to vehicles carrying drones. Even Soviet-era uniforms made a return as soldiers on horseback reenacted Red Army formations. The rehearsal culminated in a flypast over Red Square, 9 fighter jets streaking across the sky, painting the Russian flag overhead. Earlier on Saturday, Russia rehearsed the parade with a slew of military vehicles and weapons. T-34 tanks, S-400 air defense missile systems, Iskander tactical missiles, Yars intercontinental ballistic missiles, and Geran-2 drones were seen at the rehearsal. This year's parade holds a symbolic weight as it marks 80 years since Nazi Germany's defeat. The guest list reflects Russia's shifting global alliances as well. Leaders from 29 countries will be attending, including China's President Xi Jinping and Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to host more than 15 bilateral meetings over the course of the celebrations. China's People's Liberation Army Guard of Honor is also participating. In preparation, they attended 3 rehearsals and even learned Russian songs like The Sacred War and Kalinka to honor the occasion.
In order to better display the friendship between China and Russia, we've also learned to perform classic Russian songs, The Sacred War and Kalinka, and to say, long live the friendship between China and Russia, long live world peace in Russian on the Red Square.
The parade begins Friday, that's May 9th, at the iconic Red Square in Moscow. It will spotlight Russia's military prowess and its evolving international alliances amid the war in Ukraine. Victory Day remains one of the most important events in Russia's national calendar. And so this year, the parade will not just be about history. It's also a projection of power and a message to both allies and adversaries. Bureau Report, Beyond World is One.
Soon after Indians attacked Pakistan as an aggressor, every Pakistani went up to those places those were attacked. Shows the courage, shows the passion of Pakistanis, and shows the way we reject Indian terrorism and aggression. This is the protest to reject Indians' aggression. This is the protest to let the civilized world know that Pakistan does not want war. But if it comes to protect our motherland, every Pakistani is standing beside our armed forces.
Shirley and Corey, right now, some of those pro-Palestinian demonstrators are still circling the neighborhood here outside of Columbia University. But this was where it was most intense before. You can see here behind me a garbage can knocked over. It all started when Columbia University says that a group of people forced their way into the Butler Library. They say many of those were not students. But in the end, more than 75 people are arrested tonight and 2 public safety officers are injured. This is how the library occupation ended at Columbia University. Dozens of police in protective gear escorting a busload of protesters away from the Butler Library. And this is how it started, around 3 in the afternoon.
Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Pretty much all of a sudden, they started an uprising inside the library. They started putting graffiti on walls and apparently also emptying entire bookshelves.
This recent Columbia graduate watched from West 114th Street as the Butler Library was taken over by the demonstrators yelling, "Free Palestine." Columbia University said it gave all of the people inside the library the opportunity to show ID and then leave if they wanted. Those who refused were at first taken into custody by Columbia's public safety team.
They slammed my head into the ground. That's what happened.
As the evening drew on, the NYPD was called in. Officers in protective gear entering the library, demonstrators outside the university expressing their frustration that students and others were being arrested. Columbia University said in a statement in part that requesting the presence of the NYPD is not the outcome we wanted, but it was absolutely necessary to secure the safety of our community. For students who were not protesting, it was a day lost from studying for final exams.
As someone whose finals were disrupted last year around this exact time, I think it's actually unfortunate and almost a disgrace to the university, to an elite institution, to not be able to put it under control after a year.
And Columbia University officials used the word outrageous to describe the actions of those who forced their way into the Butler Library. And they said it was a violation of the policies and rules of the university. Now, charges pending against those more than 75 people who were taken into custody and arrested. Trespassing could be one of the charges. For now, we are live here outside of Columbia University. Eileen LaPalmer, Pix 11 News.
To more deals, and when do you expect the next to be announced?
Well, very close. We have numerous deals. I know Howard's going back as soon as this is finished. Your press conference, he's got numerous. And Scott, who's right over here, who's fantastic, by the way. You were great on television this morning. I watched you. That was very good. He gave them a little lesson in the world and economics. But Scott's going to be going to Switzerland, meeting with China, and you know, they very much want to make a deal. We can all play games. Who made the first call? Who didn't make it doesn't matter. It only matters what happens in that room. But I will tell you that China very much wants to make a deal. We'll see how that works out.
What is Israel's new plan to control Gaza? Israel's war cabinet has approved a plan to occupy all of Gaza, destroy any remaining infrastructure, and hold it indefinitely in order to do what it says is completely destroy Hamas. If the group fails to reach a deal by the end of US President Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East in mid-May, then Israel said it will go ahead with the plan. The plan, called Gideon's Chariots, has 3 phases. Israel has already begun phase 1, called preparation, by bombing remaining infrastructure in Rafah and starting to build a gated compound there for civilians. Next is phase 2, called mobilization, which plans to force Palestinians southward into those compounds in Rafah. Since March, Israel's military has already expanded so-called no-go zones in Gaza, taking up 70% of the strip and pushing Palestinians towards the coast. Lastly, phase 3, the ground maneuver, would see Israel's army conquer Gaza and stay there permanently. Everywhere north of the Marag axis would become emptied and cut off from aid. Once Palestinians reach Rafah, they can either stay in the compounds or flee to third countries, which would amount to ethnic cleansing. Israel calls this compound a humanitarian zone, but aid groups refuse to be a part of it, saying that they could be liable for war crimes if they do. The plan is as follows. Israel will allowing 60 aid trucks carrying basic items into Gaza per day and not an ounce more. This is 10% of the normal amount that would enter Gaza. Israel's military will inspect these trucks and then control their air transport to the compounds. There, they will set up distribution hubs, each meant to serve 5,000 to 6,000 people, under the control of American private security contractors Safe Reach Solutions and UG Solutions. Palestinians will need to pass security checkpoints through facial recognition or biometric screening in order to access the area and receive aid. If approved, a representative from each family will collect a package with 2 weeks' worth of food and hygiene items, but Israel could deny them aid for any reason, for example, knowing someone who has worked in Gaza's public sector. Throughout the war, Israel has detained and killed doctors, medics, soup kitchen chefs, journalists, and aid workers without providing a reason. The scheme will be funded by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, registered in Switzerland earlier this year and led by 3 men without any apparent links to humanitarian relief. Israel aims to stop aid groups from operating other than providing workers to hand out the aid in these hubs. But aid groups have rejected the plan, with the UN saying it seems to reinforce control over life-sustaining items as a pressure tactic, the military strategy that forces civilians to move into a gated compound under Israel's military control.
It will be more and more people concentrated in some kind of an internment camp where they will say this family member can get a box once a week without anything to barely survive if we can facial recognize that one member of that one family. It's total control of a civilian population deciding who will suffer, who will have aid, who will not. This new Israeli scheme is really an ultimatum saying the little aid we will allow in, we will dictate who will get it, where, and if they get it, and they will only provide it seems, to a few concentration points in southern Gaza, so people who cannot move to those places will be eliminated. We cannot be part of a dictatum coming from a party to an armed conflict on whom should receive humanitarian aid.
But it's not just aid groups. Israel itself is divided on the plan. Israel's military chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, has warned that Israel may not have enough troops to complete the plan and that they could lose the hostages if they go ahead with it. The government has called up 70,000 reservists, but Zamir warned that they are less motivated to keep fighting for the vague goal of destroying Hamas without a real plan to return the captives and find a day-after plan for Gaza. Israel's military is worried that 30 to 50% of summoned reservists won't show up, while public polls show that 60 to 70% of Israelis oppose an expanded operation to occupy Gaza and would prefer a plan to return the captives and end the war. The Hostage and Missing Families Forum has also sharply criticized the plan, saying that it would essentially give up on the hostages, as well as Israel's security and national resilience. But Israel's leaders seem determined to go ahead with it. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that victory over Hamas, rather than returning the captives, is the war's supreme goal. His finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, also said that Israel's military won't withdraw from captured territories, even in exchange for the return of the captives. But they still need Israeli reservists and foreign aid groups to cooperate. Instead, after months of claiming that bombing and besieging Gaza would force Hamas into a deal or destroy it entirely, Israel is facing an increasingly cynical audience inside and outside of the country. Reservist soldiers don't understand why they're being asked to deploy once again to retake areas they destroyed months ago. Israelis don't understand how another offensive will end the war. And the world doesn't understand how permanently occupying Gaza, rounding up its population into compounds controlled by American mercenaries, and forcing them to survive on subsistence level can be acceptable. But for now, at least, Israel's government is not backing down. Whether anyone will stop them remains to be seen.